No, Doc was speaking facts there, as always. But Doc, you already talked about it a little bit earlier that you've seen some Lions golf and some pro-ams and whatnot. If Doc's building a scramble group, he's picking 3 Lions to golf with him. Who's Doc taking on the course?
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
Oh, man. Well, it wouldn't be Aiden Hutchinson because he's learning, and it was crazy. He's got the size, and you look at it and you say, man, he should be able to destroy the golf ball. But nope, he's still learning, and his appearance in the Pro-Am was a little rough. I look at it with the Lions, and we had an opportunity at All Lions today. We dropped it. Alex Anzalone. I had asked the writer to ask that same question to Alex Anzalone, and he said, look, you got to have first JMO because he's probably going to be a guy that maybe will hit it 30 yards left, but will tell jokes and just make it fun. So first and foremost, Jamison Williams got to be in the scramble. Second, you probably got to have a good golfer, and I presume Jared Goff can get around, a natural athlete. Maybe Kristen Harper can be our caddy or be a support, can find our wayward balls.
you're a dog, Doc. You're a dog.
Some
You're
ulterior
always thinking
motives
the
going
different
on there.
outside the box.
JMO, Jared Goff, and probably Amon-Ra St. Brown because he probably is naturally athletic. Probably just give him one pointer and he'll start playing golf great. So you got to have one like Jameson Williams, who probably isn't that good. And then I think Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff would make it very fun as well. It'd be fun to golf with the Detroit Lions. I think a lot of shit talking would go down.
Yeah, no, that's
I'm going to
funny.
stick with the Lions, Doc. I'm going to stick with the Lions here for this question. Me and Jeff talked about it last week a little bit. When you look at this schedule, you can look at the teams matchup. When you look at personnel matchups, I brought up it was Sam Laporta, Xavier McKinney, and then Terrion Arnold and Marvin Harrison, like the one-on-one matchups I could not wait to see. When you look at the schedule, who are you most excited to watch go head-to-head this year, personnel-wise?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that when you look at it, Green Bay has revamped their defense. I think in the division is going to be sick. When I look at it too, I just, there's some revenge games on the schedule that a lot of people are talking about. I want to see the Lions match up. I want to see JMO match up against some of the top defenders. I want to see now I think Dallas's defense is going to take a step back with their defensive coordinator heading off to take a head coaching job with Washington. But I want to see JMO match up against Dallas because their secondary had a bunch of interceptions and they're always opportunistic. I look at it and I say, with Jared Goff, I want to see how he faces off against some of the pressuring defenses. Again, the matchup that I have circled is going to be Houston. Does he survive Houston when they're going to bring the pressure with, I think, Danielle Hunter on that roster or
Danielle and Will Anderson.
Yes. The revamped defensive line and a defensive-minded coach that worked with Robert Saleh with San Francisco. How does that match up as well? So I can't wait to see it when you see the schedule. Lots of opportunities for the Lions offense to match up against some solid defenses. And two, this offseason, it's been weird because the Bears got the number 1 pick, they started flexing like they did something. They got Caleb Williams, but he's still unproven, but they got a nice secondary. So I want to see the Lions offense match up against the Bears, but they talked a lot of shit this offseason. Their fan base is like tripping out because the Lions are on top and they're just talking a mad amount of shit to Lions fans online. It's really unique when you look at it. And also too, when you look at it now, I had an opportunity on the last day before our little break. I asked the Lions safeties coach, hey, the wide receivers in the NFC North, it looks pretty stacked with Jefferson, and you got a lot of great receivers with the Packers, and you realize, wow, the offensive weaponry that's available in the NFC North is pretty stout. So I'm excited to see I want to see Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold match up against the receivers in the NFC North because it's time for them to prove that the secondary is going to be something that is going to be a strength. And Alex Anzalone said it, that they feel so much more comfortable kind of seeing what Davis and Arnold can do that it makes the defense so much better because the linebackers can get after it when they know that, hey, these corners can guard a little bit better in man-to-man. So we talk about some of that at All Lions. If you go check it out today, in fact, we talked about, I believe today or yesterday, how playing more man-to-man will help the linebackers and how Alex Anzalone feels about the defense. So I just can't wait to see the Lions cornerbacks against the receivers from the NFC North because the Bears I do see some talent offensively, but I think their biggest weakness is they got a rookie quarterback and an offensive line that hasn't been known to be all that great.
I'll ask you this too, because I think this kind of ties into what you were talking about with Carlton Davis. I watched Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. They have a podcast, and one thing they discussed is ranking the NFC North secondaries. And Bucky Brooks had it: Bears 1, Packers 2, Lions 3, Vikings 4. So he had the Lions 3rd, and then Daniel Jeremiah had the Bears 1, Lions 2, Packers 3, Vikings 4. So they had the Packers and Lions switched. Where would you put the Lions in terms of their division, ranking their secondary this upcoming season?
Yeah, it's real interesting because Carlton Davis really has been a number 2, and now is kind of probably going to be tasked with taking on the number 1 role. But he's done some things. He's locked down some top receivers, including some in the NFC North, and that's where Dan Campbell came to see a player that they wanted to trade for. He saw what Carlton Davis was able to do against the Lions and the other opponents in the NFC North. So I would rank it probably Chicago 1, the Bears 2, and the Lions 3. But I think that that's at this point. But with the development of Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw down the road, I think they can get up there and perform and catch up pretty quickly. And still young. And that's the tough part, is that, when you start to research, you can start to believe, okay, Terrion Arnold could have more impact than what we potentially believe at this point, but he's still going to face a steep learning curve. He's going to face quarterbacks that are going to look to exploit, certain matchups that are going to be difficult. And the cornerback spot is naturally challenging, but I think the Lions have the opportunity, once they gel with Amik Robertson and Ennis Rakestraw. When Rakestraw catches up to speed and gets a lot more experience, I think that you got a stout physical defender that can play man-to-man. So the Lions are starting off probably 3rd in the division, but I think by the end of the year, I think if they stay healthy and develop and work with Deshae Townsend and Coach O'Neill with the safeties, I think they can catch up pretty quickly. It's all going to depend, in my opinion, on the development of Terrion Arnold. But when you look at what he brings to the table, you watch film and you see his anticipation, his footwork. You see a player that maybe will go through rookie learning pains the first quarter of the season, but by the time the bye week hits and beyond, you could be looking at a player that's going to contribute sooner rather than later. And one NFL writer that we wrote about said that, hey, could potentially be on the all-rookie team and is a candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. So we'll see about Terrion Arnold, but I think the Lions secondary will have some things to prove to the fan base that wants to see, hey, you revamped the defense. Let's see what the secondary can do. Because right now it's all on paper, and everything on paper looks great. But when you go out there on the field, you got to go prove it. And the NFC North is no joke about it. You guys see it when you look at the offensive rosters.
Yeah, and Doc, too, I want to just we're about 3 or 4 weeks out now at training camp. Almost, I would say, maybe it's like the halfway point between training camp and OTAs. Maybe I'm a little off there by a couple weeks. But I just want to get from you here. I mentioned this to you today, actually, when we met at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, just kind of any bullet points or kind of thoughts on players to kind of keep an eye out for over the next couple of weeks, whether it's injuries or maybe even some trades or something to be made here for Brad Holmes heading into training camp. Is there anything that Lions fans need to kind of keep an eye on, any players or anything like that?
Yeah, no doubt. They still have, I believe, an open roster spot. You look at it right now, they may make one additional move. Could it be at safety? Could they bring in a veteran? A lot of people look at Justin Simmons. They love that name. A lot of people look at veterans that have played the safety position because of clearly Kirby Joseph's situation. But I think they got a lot of depth at safety. They have a player in Brandon Joseph I think you should all pay attention to. I thought he had a great spring. And I think that the player from Notre Dame, go watch some film on Brandon Joseph. I think he does a great job and has an opportunity. He caught the attention of the coaching staff. And he recognized that, a lot of the players that you want to pay attention to when camp rolls around are going to be the ones that were injured. I think that it's going to be key with Kevin Zeitler, who didn't participate a lot. Those that didn't participate, we have more questions about. DJ Reader, I thought, Ali McNeil had the quote of the spring when he said he sees destruction playing alongside DJ Reader. And if he can stay healthy, oh my goodness, that makes the defensive line all that much better and could be ferocious. So Marcus Davenport, a player that, you start to see offseason workouts and those videos, and you start to see what they're about. And obviously Amon-Ra and the offense always gets in there and shows videos. Terrian is not shy and likes to show workouts, but Marcus Davenport is, I think, a guy that, hey, if you hit on him, if he can stay healthy, then you now can answer some questions. Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer, who's great, and he's a great resource for me to be able to pick the brain of and read his work. And he's got all the coaches on the Rolodex, and you'll periodically see him message the Lions, and he's had a natural rapport with Dan Campbell the entire run of Campbell's time here in Detroit. And he said, look, pay attention to some pass rushers, maybe Ngakoue, maybe some individuals that potentially you want to shore up. And that's the biggest question mark. The biggest question mark heading into training camp is going to be who is going to be opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. We've talked about it, and I think that they have enough on the roster, but they still could go out there and look for another pass rusher out there who's a free agent. But at the same time, I think the roster is pretty good at this point heading into training camp, but the players you want to pay attention to are those that were injured. And you hope that, hey, the likes of the Davenport, Reeder, and Kevin Zeitler, who didn't participate a lot in spring, you hope when we get our first look out there at training camp that they can be individuals that you say, okay, let's go, let's get after it when the season starts.
And Doc, we kind of talked about it a little bit over the months. Taylor Decker, obviously his extension keeps getting brought up. What do you think that extension would look like if we were to extend Taylor Decker?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you have a couple offensive linemen that are developing, and most people kind of presume that Manu could potentially be the left tackle of the future. Still maybe an outside shot that they do move Penei Sewell back to his college position. He could literally play both sides pretty equally and would be dominant. It's an important position, Jared Goff's blind side. I think Taylor Decker does retire a Detroit Lion. I think that when you look at this season, it's going to be very vital that Taylor Decker continue to stay healthy. He had offseason surgery. I think he's a warrior. He represents everything that the Lions are about. And I think that he plays this year and maybe next year. Maybe you get that second year to kind of bring the cap number down. But I think you need him at a lower cost, maybe around the $14-15 million range if he accepts a little bit less money to stay. But if he's in that situation where he wants one last payday, maybe another team will take a chance and offer him more money. But I do think he wants to retire in Detroit. He said the talks have kind of started in terms of the framework. I think probably you're looking at maybe at the floor 2 years, $30 million. And I think it probably happens. Maybe it happens before training camp, but maybe not. When you look at it, the organization might want to see how he performs this year. But he had a decent year. He steadily is a guy that's getting older, and you understand that you do have to start to look to the future. But that position has been guarded pretty well. Jared Goff was held pretty clean last year, so you want to get as much out of Taylor Decker as possible. And it'll be good to see how. I mean, let's look at it, man. The guy plays on an injured ankle, injured foot. He's a gritty warrior. I think that he handled. I think he's respectful, but at the same token, he doesn't like hearing his name in trade rumors. He never liked that, and he came out there and started to discuss it openly. I think he's underappreciated, but at the same token, if he wants to be in the neighborhood of where he's at now, it might be a cost-cutting situation where you go in a different direction. If Manu in the next 12 months can develop, maybe you get that confidence to move on. But I think that Taylor Decker retires a Detroit Lion. I think that he plays this year and next year and calls it a day.
And kind of going along with Decker, his main job is to protect Jared Goff. When Jared Goff just getting extended this year, where do you think has Jared said anything at OTAs, or do you think there's anything that Jared is specifically keying in on to improve this year and is going forward within his game?
Yeah, it's always asked about too. It's real interesting. And he was like, well, I can't, really break it down because it's all nerdy. But you always look at it, and he's always working on his game. I think if you look at some of the videos I share at Detroit Podcast, I think you see it. Footwork. You always want to make sure that you're properly with your mechanics fundamentally are aligned and making sure things are going okay. I think that for Jared Goff, I think that what the coaching staff said, which was great, is, and also too, which is really great, guys, too, is that we've kind of slowly spread out what the assistant coaches said, but they revealed a lot of interesting stuff in regards to Jared Goff and stuff like that. And I think Tanner Engstrand and the quarterback's coach, Mark Brunell, kind of referenced it. The decision when to pull the trigger on throwing it deep versus checking it down. the coaching staff is always going to want to make sure that Jared Goff, hey, if you see the lane and you see it open, pull the trigger, make it happen. And they want more explosive plays. And when you look at it, they still were tops of the league in explosive plays over 10 yards. But I think when you go back and review the film, I've started to do that over the last couple of weeks because, outside of talking to you guys or going out to cover golf, I like to watch film. I like to see what you can learn from last season. When you start to watch film, there's a couple plays that some receivers were open and he just didn't pull the trigger. If he just held the ball another nanosecond, I think that's what the Lions are looking at is, hey, we now have a better defense. Pull the trigger a little bit. Hey, take a chance with J-Mo. Throw the football. Try to execute a little bit more in terms of deep explosive plays, deep touchdowns. So I think that's going to be something to watch, how often he throws the ball over 30 yards when you have Jameson Williams now with a little bit more time under his belt. And for Jared Goff, I think that you start with a great foundation of keeping the football clean, not fumbling, not turning the ball over. But at the same token, I would not be surprised if he takes a couple more chances when you feel like you have a good defense that is truly bend, don't break, gives up field goals and not a lot of touchdowns. If the defense can shine, then I think Jared will be a lot more comfortable pulling the trigger. And you got $50 million, you got a lot of money guaranteed. Maybe maybe this year you start to see the true Jared Goff of old, where he's just flinging the football all down the field, and it will be great to see. But I think Jared Goff can even get better in regards to explosive deep passing and his connection. I think the number one thing you want to improve upon is, hey, target J-Mo, find J-Mo, get in rhythm as soon as possible, and make it so that J-Mo can be a star, and he's right there. So hopefully that connection can be just as good as it is with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can't wait to see it. If it is, oh man, if J-Mo becomes a stud, look out. The Lions will be unstoppable.
Yeah, I watched Mina Kimes talk about this in her podcast, and it was super interesting because the Lions had, they were up there in explosive plays, but there was a number, it was like 60% of their explosive plays came from the ground. It was like, I think it was around that number. It was from the run game compared to other teams like the Chiefs or the Chargers, where, like 70% of their explosive plays are coming through the air. So it's just, to your point there, J-Mo is kind of a big X factor with that. But I'll ask you this, John, to kind of go on training camp. And I thought this was an interesting question, which we'll probably get into one of these days. But what's one player that you think has the most to gain in training camp, and one player that you think has the most to lose in training camp? One of each, most to gain, most to lose.
Yeah, no doubt. You look at the roster, and I'm curious about some of the players on the roster that maybe are at that are competing for jobs. So I think you on offense, you kind of are pretty set in regards to things. I think players that you look at that has a lot to gain is Emmanuel Mosley. I think that if he comes in and is healthy, we haven't seen much of him. I think that he can earn some playing time and be a significant part of that defense towards the end of the year. But you look at a guy like that, and he's got a lot to prove, because I think that he's had a couple injuries that have been really severe, hasn't had a lot of time to work in this defense. And if he can be another added piece, I think he's got a lot to prove in this situation. You look at who has the most to lose. I think that, I think a lot of the jobs are pretty set. I think that the player that I think that is really high on himself, but still draws the ire of the coaching staff, is James Houston. I think he has a lot to lose if he kind of, veers off. And look, athletes have egos. It's natural. It's something that when you burst onto the scene and you get that many sacks in your rookie year, you're going to naturally think that you belong. Well, it's come year two and you get hurt and your momentum is clearly derailed. But the Lions want James Houston to be an every down defensive lineman, outside linebacker. And unfortunately, he's got the biggest trick in the game, which is being able to sack the quarterback. But at that same token, when you're able to do that, you maybe aren't as honing in on all the responsibilities. And the Lions' defensive scheme is complicated in regards to recognizing certain blitzes at certain times, the responsibility of where you need to be on certain routes, the ability to recognize certain routes and who's coming out of the backfield, where you need to be at certain times. And I think that James Houston still has a way to go to develop, but he's going to need to get in that spot. You guys saw some of the videos. He was on the outside. I think that he's going to have that opportunity, but I think that he wants to play more, but I'm not certain yet that the coaching staff trusts him enough. They say that, but the proof is still in the pudding that a guy like that has a lot of potential, but he needs to do more in regards to the little things. And I think that those are things where you got a guy with talent, but at the same time needs to do more. Is he willing to do that work when he probably knows if something happens and they move on from him, the entire league will come calling, and there will be one team that just says, hey, go sack the quarterback. Don't worry about all that other stuff. The Lions are more into, hey, developing a complete defensive lineman, a complete outside linebacker, do a lot of things. So a guy like that, I think, has a lot to lose if he doesn't deliver. And Aaron Glenn is not going to mess around. If he ain't happy, he's going to let everybody know about it. So we'll see how James Houston comes back. And also, too, I think a player that, is fighting for a job is Levi Onwuzurike. I think that he clearly knows that there's a lot of defensive linemen that could take his job. He has to prove that, hey, I can, when the pads come on, hit and get to the quarterback to keep his job, because you got Pascal there. You got others that are going to be battling. You got Betts fighting for a job. So Levi Onwuzurike, I think, is a player that I think is going to be on a lot of lists that you see that is a vet that could be cut. And, it's just unfortunate that, hey, it's a NFL, not for long. If you don't do the job, somebody else will come do it. So I'm curious to see how he does, because he kind of started to, if you say his stock, it started to rise in camp with being healthy from back surgery. So we'll see if he can sustain that success when camp rolls around.
Yeah, Doc, I want to ask you this too, real quick. I did see today on your guys' website there, SI spoke with someone there. I don't know if it was you specifically or someone there spoke with Alex Anzalone and did kind of an exclusive interview with him. And I thought it was interesting. One of the questions asked was about him and Kelvin Shepherd, saying, hey, I think he could become an all-pro linebacker this year. Klotzy's been pretty big on Anzo, and I know us as well as a whole as a show has been pretty big with Jack Campbell as well, taking a step forward this year. Can you kind of talk a little bit about the expectations for Jack, not just Jack Campbell, but also Anzalone, because he was a Pro Bowler alternate, basically just an alternate last year. But it felt like he was on his way before he kind of had that game or two where he was injured, potentially to being just a Pro Bowler in general without the alternate tag on it. Do you think he takes that step this year? And then even with that, kind of following that question, does Jack Campbell take the step with him? And then you just have an elite linebacking core here in Detroit for the future.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been great when you work with all Lions. You start to develop relationships. And the reporter, Justin Mello, he's great. And what he does is he's part of the draft network and also has the ability to freelance and put work on different sites. And I just came in contact with him just reading his work. He does a lot of college draft interviews, so he has some development where actually, if you read those interviews, the brands that the athletes work with will reach out to him, and he's developed that network that, hey, Anzalone, I think, is now pitching Campbell soup with a lot of protein. So they reach out to Justin and they say, hey, we want to promote some items. Hey, we'll give you some time with some of these athletes. And he's great. And he's great working with him because he's somebody that understands, hey, I have some questions that I'd like to ask. And some of the questions I want are out there, and he does a great work. So I've been developing relationships with him because he's got the context. So I'm like, yeah, no problem. Put your work. If you got a Detroit-based article, don't go nowhere else. Come to me. And it's been great to be able to, with the work and the support of All Lions, to be able to kind of feature other people on the site. And Justin asked fun questions. And Alex Anzalone, Kelvin Shepherd said to him and publicly that he believes that Alex Anzalone can be an all-pro. His game is developed. He's good in coverage. I think that he's a solid tackler. And you look at, in terms of speed, maybe not the most swift linebacker out there in the world, but I think he does enough to be able to be a leader and made some plays. He came on, he emerged. He had a solid 2023 season, shut up a lot of critics. And I think he can be an all-pro. I think that the gist of kind of what you read on our site the last couple of days is, with an improved secondary, the linebackers can play a lot better, a lot more free, not worrying so much about mistakes and not being so much caught up in, and Dan Campbell said it too, you don't have to be so rigid. You can kind of play a little bit more free to the football, get after it, and understand what you need to do. And I think the development of Derek Barnes, Alex Anzalone, and Jack Campbell this year should be something that's talked about and will be monitored by us and by everybody who goes out to training camp. The linebackers, I think, can do a lot of things in regards to run stopping, causing, pressure to the quarterback, making sure that, intermediate routes are cut off with no more additional yards after the catch. So Anzalone, I think, definitely can be an all-pro. But he revealed an interesting nugget. When he was asked about, might be your last year with Aaron Glenn, he might have hinted too that it might be his last year too in Detroit. And you never know if they count on Jack Campbell to do things to take his spot. He maybe just say, okay, I'm good. If the Lions win it, he might be somebody that hangs it up after a Super Bowl win, after a great career where he did get paid, and can say, okay, Jack, take the job and handle business, and the Lions can get a little bit younger. But at the same token, Aaron Glenn might depart as well. So he kind of brought up both scenarios that, hey, nobody knows what the future will hold. But the linebackers are intriguing. If Derek Barnes can also be that outside rusher that can get to the quarterback, if he emerges and learns from the mistakes he made last year and delivers the big, nasty hit on Dak Prescott and jars the football loose, then if he makes more of those plays, you did see that interception that he made. He was around the football. And I thought the funniest part of that story was Derek's all into it. He's got the golf gear, he's got the clubs, but might not be good. So he said that he played Alex Anzalone played golf with Derek Barnes in an outing just recently. So it's kind of fun when when you know that person that just gets all dressed up and gets all the gear, the hats, the fitted clubs, the nice shiny golf clubs, and then goes out there and hits it 5 yards. That
sounds like someone we know. Sounds like someone we know.
That might be Derek Barnes at this time, but he says he's getting a little bit better. So it's a fun interview. Go check it out. It's worthwhile at All Lions, and you can just check it out by typing in Detroit Detroit Lions SI, and you can find our content there. Or if you go to @Detroit Podcast on Twitter, all the links are out there. You can catch our content. It's fun. Alex Anzalone, I think, is one of those quiet locker room leaders that can be very much so a player that can, with improved play himself, can also lend some great credibility and some great production for this defense.